In this video, I want to present you my 1-year Blender journey and show you every learning I made on my way to save your precious time. The most important lesson I learned over the past year of working with an artistic approach is that every technical knowledge you have, every hour you spend leveling up your shading skills, leveling up your modeling skills, or even lighting skills is worthless if you are not developing your composition skills to at least a similar level. 1 year after starting with Blender, I am not even close to being good at controlling my own renders composition-wise. But on my way, I made some interesting learnings which could be also interesting for your work. So, here's some of them. Don't get me wrong. Chaos is in fact an important ingredient for a believable and even photorealistic image. But you have to use it the right way. This means you have to build a senseful chaos. When I say chaos, I'm talking about order of elements in the scene. As an example, take a look at this render I did half a year ago at the time I was working with Blender for a few months till then. This is a perfect example for bad chaos. The main problem you can see here is the overload of senselessly placed objects. The car on the left and directly behind the person, which moves slightly, creates such an uncontrolled chaos, especially with the other attention grabbing areas as the lights or the diner sign, so that the viewer's eye may follow a completely different direction than me, the artist, want the eye direct to. The funny thing is, the goal I followed while building this scene was to keep an eye on good composition. And if you look at some other principles of composition, you may see my effort. For example, the more or less accurate golden ratio, or rule of thirds, in which the car is placed, the framing by the car, the tree and the cables, the depth created by the foreground, midground and more or less accurate background, the frog perspective to get that hidden feeling. All those principles I at least tried to implement are suddenly destroyed by the senseless chaos I created by the two objects on the left. Isn't that a shame? If I would ask you what on the image catches your attention first, the answers may be quite different from person to person. Many of you would probably say the boat, which is quite obvious because it's in the foreground of the image. But some others would probably say that they saw the people on the bridges first, or even the moon, or the lights in the windows. And this is the problem. Now you could say, yes, but isn't it really nice that everybody who sees the artwork has a different perception of what is seen? And perhaps I would even agree with you. But there's one immense issue with this idea. The artist loses control over his idea and his wanted meaning. And of course you can use this idea if you want to achieve exactly this, or you want to create a chaotic feeling. But most of us want to tell a story, and having too much going on at the same time is most of the time a bad idea. So, the rule of thumb is, you should always have one central focus point. This focus point is the main point of the story you want to tell, and the first thing the viewer should see if he looks at the image. A positive example for this is this render I made. And even if the scene is quite simple, it delivers a story to the viewer. The viewer's eye is immediately led to the crashed cars on the road. And of course the scene is supported through leading lines to bring out the focus on the cars even more. But in this example you can see, the scene seems way more organized but still catches your interest. Another interesting example for this idea is this train render I made. Interesting because there's more than one object in focus, but still it's quite clear where the viewer's eye is led to. And this feeling is created through the interesting shapes of the objects in focus, but also through the leading lines you can find here. I already talked about this while talking about the other render, but I want to emphasize this even more, because in my opinion, leading lines are perhaps the most important, easy to use designing rule. This is such an easy way to guide the viewer's eye to the desired area. So, I would advise you to work more with leading lines if you can. You can see those in every old painting as well as every 3D art, and it always increases your artwork quality to a new level. And now, the probably most important rule, and the idea which is the base for everything we talked about before, and without you can create a pleasing image. Everybody has a story to tell, and telling a story doesn't mean you have to write a script and build a lore around your image. The story can be really simple. For example, a rock falling down a hill. But even this is probably a story interesting enough. The only challenge is to build the scene in a way that the story is presented well and keeps the viewer's attention. And of course, I have an example for this idea. If you take a look at this render we saw before, we have, in my opinion, a pretty good example of bad storytelling. Because if you think about it, there is a story. You may ask yourself, why is this man standing there? Is he even a human or something else? And why is he focusing on the diner? Why is the diner broken so much? This is in fact a basic story, which is okay, but the way the story is presented in this image is just bad. And if you have listened to what I said over the last 5 minutes, you know why. There's a senseless chaos, there's more than one focus point the viewer's eye is drawn to, and there aren't any leading lines to emphasize the story. And this is exactly what I meant earlier. Telling a story is not the hard part, but presenting the story in an interesting way, this is the challenge every 3D artist has to master. The mistakes I talked about earlier may be only a part of the important ones, but those are some of the main learnings I had in the last year working in Blender. Unfortunately, there's a hard realization I had to experience. Just implementing those principles blind and without concept will not help you in any way. You have to choose the right composition for your desired outcome. And now you probably ask me, how could I be able to do this? And unfortunately, there's only one simple but dark and demotivating truth. You have to practice. And by you, I mean of course also me, because although everything I talked about in this video is what I learned, but still I'm far away from implementing them easily in my scenes. Implementing this idea is also for me a challenge, but I can promise you that you will improve over time and become a better artist every goddamn day you practice. Bye.